The bullet meant for Master Chief James McAllister would come later. But on this particular morning, 3 days before everything changed, he stood in his quarters at Fort Lewis, watching the sun rise over mountains that had witnessed more history than most men could imagine. 58 years old, 35 of them spent in service to a nation that seemed, lately, to have forgotten what service meant. His hands, scarred and weathered, moved with practiced precision as he folded the flag that had draped his father's coffin. Vietnam, 1972. The old man had come home in a box when Jimmy was 14. The Marine Corps had sent a color guard. His mother had received a folded triangle of stars and stripes and a promise that her husband's sacrifice mattered. Jimmy had believed that promise, had spent more than 3 decades trying to honor it. Now packing for what would be his final mission before mandatory retirement, he wondered if any of it had mattered at all. The photographs on his wall told the story of a life spent in shadows. Grainy images from Panama in '89, when he'd been young and invincible, and certain that America was on the side of angels. Desert Storm, Somalia, the Balkans, Afghanistan in those early days when the mission still made sense. Iraq, where sense had gone to die along with too many of his brothers. Each photograph a moment frozen in time, each one a reminder of faces that would never age beyond the moment the camera captured them. He touched the frame holding his Silver Star citation. The words were bureaucratic, clinical. They failed entirely to capture the reality of that night in Fallujah. The smell of cordite and blood. The sound a man makes when he realizes he's dying. The weight of another man's life in your arms as you carry him through streets that want you both dead. The citation said he'd displayed exceptional valor. What it didn't say was that he'd been terrified every second, that he still woke up sometimes, 2 decades later, hearing the screams. His phone buzzed. His daughter, Sarah, 32 years old now with children of her own. She'd been 3 when he'd missed her birthday for the first time. Deployment. There had been 14 more missed birthdays after that. Christmases, recitals, soccer games, all the small moments that built a childhood, and he'd traded them for land and blood and the kind of memories that don't leave room for anything soft. Dad, her voice carried warmth that he didn't deserve. You still coming next month? For Tommy's birthday. Tommy, his grandson, 8 years old, the same age Jimmy had been when his own father had shipped out for the last time. Yes, sweetheart, this is the last one. After this, I'm done. Home for good. There was a pause on the line. His daughter knew what done meant. Retirement wasn't a vacation for men like her father. It was an identity crisis with a pension attached. Promise? Promise. He ended the call and looked back at the wall. 35 years of promises. To his country, to his brothers, to his family. Some kept, too many broken. But this one, this final promise to his daughter, he would keep. One more mission, then he could finally figure out who James McAllister was when he wasn't Master Chief McAllister. The morning air was cold as he walked to the memorial wall outside the base headquarters. Habit brought him here before every mission. Ritual. The names carved in black granite stretched longer every year. Rodriguez, Simmons, Chen, Michaels. Brothers who'd made the ultimate sacrifice while he'd somehow continued to draw breath. Survivor's guilt, the counselors called it, as if giving it a name made it easier to carry. His finger traced Rodriguez's name, Fallujah. The citation didn't mention that Rodriguez had been singing some country song about going home. He'd been 23, had never made it past that street corner where an IED had turned a Humvee into a crematorium. Still talking to ghosts, Master Chief? The voice belonged to Lieutenant Commander Derek Stone, 38, new generation, the kind of operator who'd grown up with drones and satellites and thermal imaging. Good at his job, maybe too good, the kind of confidence that came from never having seen a plan completely fall apart. That would come with time. It always did. Just reminding myself why we do this. Stone nodded toward the wall. My father's name is up there. Kandahar, 2004. I was 15. Something shifted in McAllister's assessment of the younger officer. Shared grief created bonds that couldn't be forged any other way. He'd be proud of you. I hope so. Stone checked his watch. Briefing in 20. You ready for your victory lap? Victory lap. That's what they were calling it. One final mission for the old warhorse before they put him out to pasture. McAllister didn't bother correcting him, Let the young ones think retirement was something to celebrate. They'd learn different soon enough. 600 miles away in a sparse apartment that felt more like a cell than a home, Maya Reeves jerked awake from a nightmare that had become as familiar as breathing. 3 in the morning. Always 3. Her body had learned to anticipate the dream, bracing for impact seconds before the images hit. Kabul. The rooftop. Sullivan beside her, blood pooling beneath him where the enemy round had punched through his lower spine. The target in her scope. The chemist. 800 meters. Perfect conditions. The shot of a lifetime. And her spotter dying. The choice. She'd chosen Sullivan. Had dropped the rifle and dragged him off that roof, engaging 6 hostiles on the way down. 4 kills, 2 wounded, 3.8 kilometers to the extraction point with 190 pounds of dead weight on her shoulders. Every meter painted in blood and cordite, and the certainty that she was failing everyone who mattered. Sullivan had lived, paralyzed from the waist down, but alive. The chemist had escaped, had built another lab, had produced the chemical weapons that had killed 17 people in Ankara 3 months later. 17 civilians, men, women, children, all dead because she'd chosen one life over 17. The Army had called it poor judgment, emotional compromise. They'd reassigned her from Joint Special Operations Command to intelligence analysis. A desk, reports, satellite imagery, no more triggers, no more choices, no more blood on her hands. Except the blood never really washed off. She sat on the edge of her bed, waiting for her hands to stop shaking. Her apartment was military neat, sparse, no photographs, no personal items, nothing that could be left behind when she inevitably had to move again. The only decoration was a set of dog tags on her nightstand, not hers, her father's. Captain James Reeves, United States Marine Corps, killed in action, Hugh City, 1968. She'd been born 6 months after they'd shipped his body home. Her mother had raised her on stories of a man she'd never know, a hero, a warrior, a man who'd always done the right thing, even when the right thing cost everything. Maya had joined the Army to honor that memory, had become a sniper because her father had been one, had spent 11 years trying to live up to a ghost. Now she was a ghost herself, the Army's problem child, too skilled to discharge, too damaged to trust. So they'd given her a desk and hoped she'd fade away quietly. She moved to the closet, past the uniforms that fit looser than they used to, past the running shoes worn thin from midnight miles trying to outrun memories, to the back corner where a rifle case sat gathering dust that she cleaned away every morning. Barrett M82, 50 caliber, 29 pounds of precision engineering, unauthorized for her current assignment, unauthorized for anyone outside of specific special operations units. But she'd never turned it in after Kabul, had kept it through the reassignment, maintained it, cleaned it. The ritual was meditative, the only time her hands didn't shake. She feels strip on the weapon by touch in the dark. Bolt assembly, barrel, recoil spring, each piece familiar as her own body. As she cleaned, she counted. 47. 47 confirmed kills across 17 operational deployments. 47 faces she saw every time she closed her eyes. 47 ghosts who visited her at 3 in the morning. The Army had taught her to shoot. Her father's memory had taught her to care about every trigger pull. The nightmares had taught her that caring didn't make the dead any less dead. Her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but the area code was Fort Lewis. Orders, always orders. The Army didn't call at 3 a.m. to chat. Reeves. Staff Sergeant Reeves, this is Colonel Hendricks. You're being attached to SEAL Team 7 for a domestic counterterrorism operation. Report to Fort Lewis, 0700 tomorrow. Your role is intelligence analysis and target identification. Non-combatant status. Briefing materials are being transmitted now. The line went dead. No questions invited, no details offered. Non-combatant status. Translation, we don't trust you with a weapon anymore. Just show up, look at some photographs, tell the real operators who to kill, and stay out of the way. She looked at the Barrett, at her reflection in the dark window, at the dog tags that had outlived the man who'd worn them. Her father's voice, memory or imagination, whispered in the silence. Courage isn't absence of fear, Maya. It's doing the right thing anyway. She wondered what the right thing was anymore, whether she'd recognize it if she saw it, whether she had any courage left, or just the muscle memory of someone who used to be brave. By 4 a.m., she was packed. The Barrett went into her deployment bag, wrapped in a sleeping bag where it wouldn't show on casual inspection. Unauthorized. Court-martial offense. But some things you didn't leave behind. Some tools you kept because you never knew when the situation would require capabilities beyond what anyone expected. She touched her father's dog tags one more time. A prayer, a plea, a promise that she'd try to make him proud, even if she'd stop believing she was capable of it. The sun rose over Fort Lewis, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Maya Reeves watched it from the briefing room, surrounded by men who looked at her like she was cargo. The intelligence asset, the desk jockey playing soldier for a day. She could see it in their eyes. The dismissal, the certainty that she didn't belong. Master Chief James McAllister was the only one who looked at her differently. His eyes, weathered and knowing, held recognition. He'd seen combat, real combat, the kind that changed you, and he saw the same recognition in her. Lieutenant Commander Stone stood at the front of the room, pointer in hand, satellite imagery on the screen behind him. Gentlemen and Sergeant Reeves, a pause that made the distinction clear. Our target is a domestic extremist cell operating out of the Cascade Wilderness. Intelligence suggests they're stockpiling weapons and planning coordinated attacks on federal infrastructure. Stone clicked to the next image. A compound, buildings, fortifications. The group calls themselves the Brotherhood, approximately 15 to 20 members. Former military, well-armed, well-trained. They've been on our radar for 8 months, but recent chatter suggests they're accelerating their timeline. McAllister's voice cut through the briefing like a knife through silk. Quiet, certain. Intelligence suggests, he let the words hang. That's what they said about WMDs in Iraq. The room went still. Stone's jaw tightened. Master Chief, with respect, the intelligence has been verified through multiple sources. With respect, McAllister's tone made it clear how much respect was actually involved. I've been doing this since you were in diapers, Lieutenant Commander, and I've learned that when someone uses the phrase intelligence suggests, what they mean is we think maybe probably, but we're not sure. Stone's face colored. Rank gave him authority. Experience gave McAllister something more powerful, credibility. The mission parameters are clear. Reconnaissance first, identify leadership, assess capabilities. If necessary, we're authorized for direct action. Define necessary. If they pose an imminent threat to civilian lives or federal assets. And who decides what's imminent? The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. This was more than a briefing. This was a conflict of philosophies. Old school caution versus new generation certainty. The weight of experience against the confidence of technology. Stone turned to Maya. Sergeant Reeves, your role is observation and target identification. You'll review our imagery, identify individuals, and provide tactical intelligence. You're not part of the assault element. Clear? Clear, sir. Questions? Maya raised her hand. Every head in the room turned. What's the evidence that they're planning an attack? Specific evidence, not chatter. Stone clicked to another slide. Financial transactions, weapon purchases, social media posts. They've acquired significant ordnance over the past 6 months. AR platforms, ammunition, explosives. Their online presence shows anti-government rhetoric and calls for action. So they're exercising their Second Amendment rights in saying things the government doesn't like. McAllister's voice was flat. That's not the same as planning an attack. It's enough for a federal warrant. A warrant isn't proof, it's permission. Stone's eyes locked with McAllister's. A battle of wills playing out in silence. Finally, Stone broke the stare. Wheels up at 2300 hours. Insertion at Euro 100. Any other questions? Silence. Dismissed. The team filed out. Maya lingered, studying the satellite imagery. Something about it bothered her. The compound layout, defensive positions, not offensive staging. The buildings were fortified, but the fortifications faced outward, protecting something inside, not preparing to attack something outside. You see it too? McAllister stood beside her, close enough that she could smell coffee and boot polish and 35 years of service. See what, Master Chief? Whatever's bothering you about those photos. She glanced at him, weighing whether honesty was worth the risk. His eyes held no judgment, just curiosity, professional interest. They're not configured for offensive operations. This looks like a group preparing to defend, not attack. That's what I thought too. He studied her with the kind of attention that missed nothing. You've seen combat, Real combat, not the training kind. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes, Master Chief. How many deployments? 17. His eyebrows rose slightly. 17 deployments for someone her age meant she'd been operational since she was barely out of basic training. Meant she'd been good enough to keep deploying. Meant she'd seen things that most soldiers never would. And now they've got you reading satellite photos. That's the assignment, Master Chief. Assignment. He turned back to the imagery. You know what I've learned in 35 years, Sergeant? Assignments change. Situations evolve. And when everything goes to hell, what matters isn't your assignment. It's your capability. He walked away, leaving her alone with the satellite images and the uncomfortable feeling that Master Chief James McAllister saw more than she wanted anyone to see. Yeah. The helicopter cut through fog so thick it felt like flying through wet concrete. MH-60 Blackhawk, rotors beating a rhythm that Maya had heard in 100 insertions. The sound that meant you were minutes away from whatever waited in the dark. She was wedged between two SEALs who'd made it clear through body language that she was cargo, not crew. Master Chief McAllister sat across from her, eyes closed, but she could tell he wasn't sleeping. He was doing what professionals did before insertion, running through scenarios, checking mental checklists, preparing for the moment when training would have to carry them through chaos. Lieutenant Commander Stone was on comms with the pilot. Coordinates, approach vectors, LZ conditions. The mechanical precision of modern warfare. Everything planned, everything calculated, nothing left to chance. Except chance didn't care about plans. The crew chief held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. The team stirred, checking weapons, adjusting gear. Maya checked her own equipment. M4 carbine, standard issue for her non-combatant role. Her pack was heavier than regulation, but no one had asked why. Inside, wrapped in a sleeping bag, the Barrett waited, just in case. Master Chief McAllister opened his eyes, looked directly at her, and nodded once. She nodded back. A moment of understanding, passing between warriors who recognized each other across the divide of rank and assignment and everything that tried to separate soldiers who'd bled from soldiers who'd just worn the uniform. The Blackhawk descended through fog that swallowed the world. The crew chief gave the signal. 30 seconds. Stone's voice over the team frequency. Remember, reconnaissance first. Observe, report. We're here to gather intelligence, not start a war. McAllister's response was too quiet for the comms to pick up, but Maya read his lips. Wars start whether we want them to or not. Boots hit ground, moss-covered earth that absorbs sound like a grave absorbing a casket. The Blackhawk lifted away, rotors fading until there was nothing but forest and fog, and 8 operators plus 1 intelligence analyst moving through terrain that had been here long before Americans had decided it was worth fighting over. McAllister took point. Not the youngest, not the fastest, but the most experienced. And in this moment, experience mattered more than speed. He moved like smoke through the undergrowth, reading the forest like a language he'd learned through decades of practice. A broken branch here. Disturbed moss there. The faint scent of cigarette smoke carried on wind that whispered through Douglas for as older than the nation they served. They moved in tactical formation, spacing calculated to provide mutual support without bunching up enough to make a single ambush catastrophic. Professional. Precise. Everything that training and doctrine said they should be. But McAllister kept stopping. Hand signals that meant wait, listen, observe. Something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on what. Just the instinct that came from surviving situations where instinct was the only thing standing between you and a body bag. 4 hours into the movement, dawn began filtering through the canopy, the kind of light that made everything look peaceful, that lied about what the day might bring. They reached their observation point, a rocky outcrop that gave them line of sight to the compound below. Stone brought up his optics, started identifying structures, counting personnel, assessing capabilities. Maya moved to where she could see, pulling out her own binoculars. What she saw made her breath catch. The compound was exactly what the satellite imagery had shown. But satellite imagery missed things, like the fact that every visible building flew an American flag, like the Marine Corps banner alongside the Stars and Stripes, like the memorial garden with white crosses that marked fallen brothers, like the group of men sitting around a fire pit, gray hair and weathered faces and prosthetic limbs, and the unmistakable bearing of warriors who'd given pieces of themselves to a nation that had stopped giving anything back. These aren't terrorists. McAllister's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of certainty. They're veterans. Stone kept looking through his scope, checking identification against the briefing materials. They match the intelligence profile. These are our targets. They're drinking coffee and telling war stories. That's not a terrorist cell. That's a support group. Maya focused on one individual, older than the others, maybe 65, limping heavily as he moved between buildings, carrying himself with the kind of authority that came from leading men in situations where leadership meant the difference between everyone going home or no one going home. She pulled up the intelligence file on her tablet. Cross-reference facial recognition. Got a hit. Victor Krasinski, former Delta Force. Multiple tours Afghanistan and Iraq. Honorably discharged 2019. Wife died of cancer 2021. Son killed in action Helmand Province 2019. McAllister's head snapped around. Victor? That's Victor? You know him? Served with him in the sandbox. Good man. One of the best. What the hell is he doing here? Maya kept reading. After his wife's death, he filed for VA benefits to cover her medical bills. Denied. Filed appeal. Denied. Filed complaint about VA mismanagement. Blacklisted from services. The picture was coming together. Not terrorists. Broken men that a broken system had failed. Gathering together because they had nowhere else to go. Armed because they'd learned the hard way that the only people you could count on to protect you were the ones who'd already proven they would. Stone was calling it in. Overwatch to command. We have visual on target compound, confirming presence of primary subjects. Request guidance on next phase. The radio crackled. Colonel Hendrick's voice. Maintain observation. Do not engage without direct authorization. Federal response team is being mobilized. McAllister looked at Stone. Federal response team, you mean FBI? Need to know basis, Master Chief. I need to know if we're about to watch them raid a group of veterans who aren't breaking any laws. They're stockpiling weapons, making threats against the government. They're exercising their rights and talking shit. I've done both, so have you. The tension was building again. Two philosophies colliding. Stone saw targets. McAllister saw brothers. Both were right, both were wrong, and somewhere in the middle was the truth that neither wanted to acknowledge, that sometimes there were no good choices, only consequences. Maya kept watching the compound, kept counting. 15 visible individuals, all male, all military age or older, all moving with the kind of ease that came from training that never fully left. They weren't preparing for an attack. They were just existing, living day to day, surviving, together. She thought about her father's dog tags, about Sullivan bleeding out on a Kabul rooftop, about the 17 people in Ankara who died because she'd chosen one life over many, about the choice that had cost her everything she'd built and left her with nothing but nightmares and a rifle she wasn't supposed to have. Young Ryan Garrett, the baby of the team at 26, whispered over the tactical frequency, Master Chief, got movement, southeast perimeter, multiple contacts. McAllister swung his optics. Maya did the same. Through the trees, figures moving, not the veterans from the compound. Different, professional, tactical gear, weapons at the ready, moving with the precision of a trained assault force. But their uniforms were wrong. No insignia, no identification. Private military contractors maybe, or something else. Stone saw them too. Command, we have unknown third party approaching compound from multiple vectors. Request identification. Static, then. Stand by. McAllister's voice was hard. Stand by means they know exactly who those people are, and they don't want to tell us. The unknown force kept advancing. The veterans in the compound hadn't seen them yet, were sitting around their fire, drinking their coffee, completely unaware that professionals were moving into position around their perimeter. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong, but wrong didn't mean Maya could do anything about it. She was here to observe, to analyze, to report, not to act. That decision had been taken from her when they decided she couldn't be trusted to make choices under fire. Then the first shots rang out, not from the compound, from the unknown force. Suppressed weapons fire, professional and precise, aimed at the veterans who dove for cover, reaching for weapons they'd kept close out of habit, not paranoia. Habit that was about to be vindicated in blood. Stone was on the radio. Command, we have active shooter situation. Unknown force engaging target compound. Request immediate guidance. The compound was returning fire now. Veterans who'd learned their trade in deserts and mountains, applying those lessons to forest warfare. They were outnumbered but not outmatched. Not yet. McAllister was watching the tactical situation unfold with the cold assessment of someone who'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. Lieutenant Commander, we need to intervene. Our orders are to observe. Our orders are about to get American veterans killed by mercenaries. We don't know they're mercenaries. I know they're not FBI, I know they're not ATF, and I know that if we sit here and watch this happen, every one of us will carry it for the rest of our lives. Stone's face was torn. Duty said observe. Conscience said act. Career said follow orders. Honor said protect your brothers, even when your brothers were on the wrong side of a federal warrant. Then young Garrett made the choice for all of them. A round from the unknown force caught him in the shoulder. Not center mass, thank God, but enough to spin him around and drop him behind cover, blood spreading across his tactical vest. Doc Martinez was moving before anyone gave the order, crawling to Garrett's position, medical training overriding everything else. Maya moved too, instinct taking over, covering Doc's movement with her M4, scanning for threats. The situation had just gone from observation to active engagement. They were in it now, all of them, whether they'd chosen it or not. McAllister's voice over the team frequency was calm. The kind of calm that came from 3.5 decades of keeping his head when everything went to hell. All elements, we are engaged. Return fire on unknown hostiles only. Do not engage compound personnel. Repeat, compound personnel are not targets. Stone looked at him. A long moment where junior rank wrestled with senior experience. Finally, confirmed, all elements, engage unknown hostiles. Avoid compound personnel. The forest erupted in gunfire. Professional chaos. The kind of controlled violence that separated special operations from regular infantry. Each SEAL knowing his sector. Each one managing his ammunition. Each one moving, shooting, communicating like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Because they had. Maya found herself behind a fallen log next to McAllister. He was engaging targets with precision, not spraying and praying like amateurs, but making every round count. Counting rounds, changing magazines, scanning for threats. Between bursts, he glanced at her. You okay? Yeah. Good, because this is about to get worse. He was right. Through the chaos, Maya could see the tactical picture developing. The unknown force had superior numbers and position. The SEALs were caught in the middle. The veterans from the compound were holding their own, but they were taking casualties. This was turning into a three-way firefight where everyone was going to bleed. Garrett was down. Doc was working on him, but he was exposed, vulnerable. The compound veterans were pinned. The SEALs were outnumbered. And somewhere in the fog of war, decisions were being made by people who weren't here, weren't bleeding, weren't dying. Maya's mind raced through calculations. Ranges, positions, fields of fire, the tactical geometry that determined who lived and who died. She could see what needed to happen, could see the solution, but implementing it would mean revealing capabilities she wasn't supposed to have, would mean admitting she'd brought unauthorized equipment, would mean sacrificing what was left of her career. She looked at Garrett, 26 years old, bleeding, scared, alive because Doc was good at his job, but alive was temporary in this situation without intervention. She looked at McAllister, 58, last mission before retirement, about to die in a forest fighting enemies he couldn't identify to protect people his own government had marked as targets. She looked at the veterans in the compound, her father's generation, warriors who'd given everything and received nothing, about to be killed by contractors who'd probably justify it as just following orders. 3 a.m, she was haunted by the 17 people in Ankara, the choice she'd made, the cost of choosing one life over many. But this wasn't Ankara. This wasn't choosing one over 17. This was choosing many over many, choosing to act instead of watch, choosing to be the person her father had raised her to be, even if it cost her everything she had left. She made her decision. Rolling away from the fallen log, staying low, Maya crawled back toward where they'd cached their rucks. McAllister saw her moving, provided covering fire, trusting her even though he couldn't know what she was doing. She reached her pack, unzipped it. The Barrett M82 emerged like a promise or a threat, depending on which end you were looking from. 29 pounds of precision, unauthorized, court-martial offense. the tool that would end her career and maybe save everyone's life. Her hands assembled the weapon with the muscle memory of 1,000 repetitions. Bolt, barrel, magazine, scope, bipod, each piece clicking into place, the Barrett coming alive in her hands. She found a position, slight elevation, natural concealment, line of sight to the entire battle space. This was what she'd been trained for, what she'd excelled at, what had cost her everything and was about to cost her everything again. Through the scope, the battlefield resolved into clarity. Targets at 300 meters, 500, 700. Unknown hostiles advancing on multiple vectors. Professional, coordinated, lethal. Her breathing slowed. Heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the reticle and the target and the space between intention and action. First target, machine gunner suppressing the compound. Behind cover that would stop rifle rounds, would stop anything conventional. But the Barrett wasn't conventional, and Maya wasn't aiming at the cover, she was aiming through it. Her finger found the trigger, the familiar weight, the point of no return. Master Chief McAllister's voice echoed in her memory. When everything goes to hell, what matters isn't your assignment, it's your capability. Her father's voice. Courage is doing the right thing anyway. Sullivan's voice. You did the right thing, I'd be dead. 17 voices from Ankara that she'd never heard but imagined every night. We died because of you. And her own voice, finally after 3 years of silence. Not this time. She pressed the trigger. The Barrett roared. 50 caliber truth traveling at 2,800 feet per second. The sound rolled through the forest like thunder. And everything changed. The Barrett's recoil was a familiar violence. 29 pounds of weapon trying to escape Maya's shoulder. Physics and fury contained by training and muscle memory built over 11 years of squeezing triggers that ended lives. The sound rolled through the Cascade forest like Judgment Day arriving early. 50 caliber thunder that made every other weapon on the battlefield sound like children playing with firecrackers. Through her scope, Maya watched the impossible happen. The Douglas fir trunk was 2 feet of solid wood, the kind of cover that conventional wisdom said would stop anything short of artillery. Conventional wisdom hadn't met a 50 BMG round traveling at 2,800 feet per second with 13,000 foot-pounds of energy behind it. The bullet punched through bark and heartwood like they were tissue paper, created a temporary wound cavity through solid timber that existed for milliseconds but changed everything. Emerged on the far side with enough remaining velocity to find the man hiding behind what he thought was safety. The contractor dropped without sound, without warning. One moment he was directing fire at the veteran compound. The next he was gone. His teammates wouldn't understand what had just happened for crucial seconds, would be scanning their established threat vectors, looking for danger from predictable angles. They wouldn't be looking for someone who could shoot through trees. Maya's breathing was controlled, mechanical. The part of her brain that felt things had shut down the moment her finger had found the trigger. What remained was pure calculation, target assessment, range estimation, wind compensation. Ballistic mathematics solved faster than conscious thought. Second target, 550 meters. A contractor using a boulder for cover, firing controlled bursts at the SEAL position. Good tactical discipline. Professional, probably had a family, probably thought he was doing the right thing, following orders from people who paid well and asked few questions. Maya didn't let herself think about that. Couldn't afford to. Doc Martinez was exposed, working on Garrett, both of them vulnerable to the fire this contractor was directing. Simple math. 2 American lives versus 1 man making bad choices. She adjusted for wind, for the slight uphill angle, for the way the bullet would behave passing through sparse undergrowth between her position and the target. Her finger pressured the trigger. The Barrett spoke again. This round found the narrow gap between boulders, threaded through an opening that looked impossible from any angle except the one Maya had found through 30 seconds of calculation and 11 years of practice. The contractor jerked once and went still. 2 down, 18 seconds between shots. Master Chief McAllister, 50 meters below her position, heard the distinctive reports, recognized what no one else on the battlefield could have. That sound, that interval, that precision. He'd worked with snipers for 3.5 decades, had called in long-range fires in a dozen countries across 4 continents, knew the difference between someone shooting and someone hunting. Someone was hunting. He risked a glance toward where he'd last seen Maya, Empty space. She'd moved. He scanned higher ground, looking for the position a professional would choose. Caught a glimpse of movement between two moss-covered boulders, the distinctive profile of a Barrett M82. Jesus Christ, he whispered. She brought the 50. Lieutenant Commander Stone was too busy managing the tactical situation to process what McAllister had said. The unknown contractors were pressing hard. The veteran compound was returning fire but taking casualties. The SEALs were caught in the middle of something that made no sense but was going to kill all of them if someone didn't change the equation. Maya was changing the equation. Third target, 700 meters. An enemy sniper in a tall pine tree. Good position. Elevation and concealment. He'd already wounded one of the compound veterans, was tracking for another shot. Through her scope, Maya could see him settling behind his rifle. Professional setup. Quality optics. But he was looking at the wrong battlefield. Was focused on targets below, not threats from unexpected angles. Maya calculated bullet drop at this range. 180 inches. The round would arc like a rainbow, falling to earth with terminal velocity that made distance irrelevant. She led the target slightly, accounting for the way wind at different altitudes would push the bullet. Mathematics and instinct merging into certainty. The Barrett roared. 2.3 seconds later, the sniper fell from his perch like a puppet with cut strings. The crack of the .50 caliber round, arriving, echoed off the mountains a moment after impact. By then, Maya was already tracking her next target. The contractors were starting to panic. Their tactical discipline was fragmenting. 3 of their own down, and they couldn't identify the threat. The sound of the Barrett echoed through the forest, bouncing off terrain, making directional assessment impossible. Could be anywhere. Could be everywhere. Fourth target, 450 meters. A contractor with a machine gun, suppressing the SEAL position. He was good, knew his business. Firing controlled bursts that kept everyone's heads down while his teammates maneuvered. The kind of professional that special operations units paid premium wages to recruit. Maya didn't aim at him. She aimed at his weapon. The .50 caliber round hit the machine gun's receiver. 12 pounds of steel and polymer disintegrated. The mechanism that fed belt into chamber ceased to exist in any meaningful way. Fragments of destroyed weapon became shrapnel, finding the operator who'd been relying on the gun to keep him safe. He went down hard. The machine gun fire that had been pinning the SEALs went silent. In the sudden quiet, McAllister heard Stone's voice over the tactical frequency. "Who the hell is shooting? Where's that coming from?" McAllister keyed his own radio. "That's Reeves. She's on Overwatch." "Reeves, the analyst?" The analyst who apparently decided her assignment description was more of a suggestion than a restriction. Stone's response was lost in the sound of the Barrett firing again. Fifth target, a contractor coordinating movement via radio. His voice had been directing the assault, professional and calm, keeping his scattered team organized despite mounting casualties. Leadership in chaos. Exactly the kind of target you eliminated first if you wanted an enemy force to collapse into confusion. Maya's round found him at 600 meters. The radio he'd been speaking into went silent. The coordinated assault lost its coordination. What had been a disciplined tactical operation began fragmenting into isolated individuals trying to survive an invisible threat they couldn't counter. 5 targets, 90 seconds. Maya safed the Barrett for a moment, letting the barrel cool slightly, giving herself time to assess. Her hands were steady now. The shaking that haunted her at 3 in the morning had vanished the moment she'd committed to action. This was who she'd been before Kabul, before Sullivan, before 17 people in Ankara and 3 years of guilt that had nearly buried her. This was Ghost. The sniper JSOC had deployed when impossible shots needed to be made. The operator who'd racked up 47 confirmed kills because she understood that sometimes violence was the answer, and precision violence saved more lives than it cost. Below, in the chaos of the firefight, the compound veterans were recognizing that something had changed. Victor Krasinski, 65 years old with a bad leg and memories of 30 years in Delta Force, watched enemy positions go silent one after another. Watched contractors who'd been directing murderous fire suddenly disappear. Watched the impossible happen with the professional appreciation of someone who'd once done impossible things himself. He grabbed the radio from the young veteran beside him, keyed the frequency he'd heard the Federal team using. "Federal element, this is Krasinski. Don't know who your angel is, but tell him thank you." McAllister, Hearing this over the open frequency, almost smiled. Almost. The situation was still desperately bad. They were still surrounded by hostiles who, while disorganized, still had numbers and position. Garrett was wounded, they were running low on ammunition, and somewhere above them, Maya was burning through a 10-round magazine, 150 caliber truth at a time. But for the first time since the shooting started, McAllister thought they might actually survive this. The contractors were attempting to withdraw, falling back through the forest in clusters that bore no resemblance to the disciplined, tactical element that had initiated the ambush. Maya tracked them through her scope, long range now, 800 meters and beyond, moving through dense forest where conventional doctrine said precision fire was impossible. Conventional doctrine hadn't accounted for someone with Maya's skill and a weapon system that turned impossible into merely difficult. Sixth target, 850 meters. A contractor running hard, thinking distance would save him. Through her scope, Maya could see his face. Mid-30s, beard, running with the kind of panic that came from watching your team disintegrate around you. He thought he was far enough away, thought the forest would protect him, thought whoever was killing his brothers couldn't reach him through this much terrain. He was wrong. Maya calculated his path, his speed, the angle of his movement, led him by 6 feet, accounted for wind that would push the bullet 18 inches right at this range, compensated for the bullet drop that made anything beyond 800 meters an art as much as science. Her breathing was controlled, heart rate steady. The world narrowed to mathematics and certainty. The Barrett's trigger broke clean, the recoil familiar now, almost comforting in its consistency. Physics and chemistry combining into kinetic truth that traveled faster than sound, faster than thought, faster than the contractor's last desperate hope that he might survive this day. The round found him mid-stride, center mass, the kind of shot that ended questions immediately. He went down in the undergrowth, hidden from everyone except Maya, who watched through her scope to confirm the hit. Professional, clinical, necessary. The man had been trying to kill veterans, had chosen this work, had accepted the risks. Those facts didn't make it easier, but they made it possible. The contractor collapsed. The sound of the Barrett's report reached his position a second after the bullet, thunder arriving late to announce judgment already passed. Seventh and eighth targets, 780 meters. 2 contractors moving together using buddy system tactics. One slightly ahead, one covering. Good training. The kind of tactical discipline that kept soldiers alive in combat zones where everyone was trying to kill you. In almost any other situation, the right call. But Maya had 2 rounds left in her magazine and 20 seconds to use them before the targets reached cover that even 50 caliber couldn't penetrate. She tracked the lead man, adjusted for range, wind, movement. The calculation was instinctive now. 11 years of practice compressed into split-second assessment. Her finger found the trigger. Squeezed. The Barrett roared. The lead contractor went down. Professional hit. Textbook execution. One moment moving, next moment gone. His partner reacted exactly as training dictated. Turned toward the threat. Tried to assess the danger. Tried to locate the shooter. Fatal mistake. Professional habit that cost him everything. Maya's second shot was already in motion before the first man had finished falling. She'd anticipated the reaction, had known the partner would turn, had calculated where he'd be in the half-second it took her to chamber another round and reacquire. The Barrett spoke its truth again. Both men down, 18 seconds between shots. The kind of precision that came from training that never stopped, even when you were sitting at a desk pretending you weren't a weapon anymore. 3 rounds remaining in the magazine. 9 total fired, 9 men who'd woken up this morning thinking they'd do a job and go home. 9 families who'd be getting notifications. 9 sets of consequences rippling outward from choices made by people who weren't here, weren't bleeding, weren't dying. Maya felt each one, the weight accumulating. 47 ghosts were about to become 56. The arithmetic of violence, the cost of capability, the price of choosing to act when action meant ending lives to save lives. Her hands shook now, the adrenaline dump catching up, the reality of what she'd done penetrating the professional calm that had carried her through the shooting. 9 men, 9 trigger pulls, 9 decisions that couldn't be unmade. But below, Master Chief McAllister was standing, Lieutenant Commander Stone was calling for status checks. Doc Martinez was stabilizing Garrett. The veterans in the compound were emerging from cover, alive because Maya had chosen to be a warrior instead of a witness. The math was brutal but clear. 9 lives taken, 12 lives saved. The kind of equation that looked simple on paper but carved itself into your soul in ways that never healed, only scarred. She safed the Barrett, took a long breath, let the reality settle. This was who she was, who she'd always been beneath the desk, in the reports, and the 3 years of trying to pretend she could be anything else. Ghost, the sniper who made impossible shots because someone had to. The warrior who carried the weight because carrying weight was better than watching good people die. Her father's dog tags, tucked beneath her tactical vest, pressed against her skin. Captain James Reeves, who died in Hugh City doing what he thought was right. She wondered if he'd felt this same weight, this same terrible certainty that you'd done what needed doing, even though it would haunt you forever. Probably. That's what made warriors warriors, not the killing, the carrying, the willingness to add weight to your soul so others could walk lighter. The battlefield had gone quiet except for the ringing in everyone's ears. The professional violence had lasted 12 minutes from Maya's first shot to her 9th. 12 minutes that had taken a certain federal massacre and turned it into a confused withdrawal punctuated by bodies that shouldn't have been bodies and trauma that would haunt whoever survived long enough to process what had happened. The silence after combat was always strange, oppressive, like the air itself was holding its breath. Maya stayed in position, scanning for threats, professional paranoia keeping her sharp even though logic said the immediate danger had passed. Below, she could see McAllister moving between positions, checking his team, ensuring everyone was accounted for. 35 years of leadership showing in every movement, making sure his people were okay before worrying about anything else. Garrett was sitting up now, Doc Martinez beside him, working with practiced efficiency. The young petty officer's face was pale, but he was conscious, talking, making the kind of dark jokes that soldiers made when they'd just been reminded how close death had come. His shoulder was bandaged tight. The bleeding stopped. He'd need surgery, physical therapy, probably months of recovery. But he'd live, would go home, would see his family again. Because Maya had pulled a trigger 9 times, the mathematics of it made her sick and grateful in equal measure. 9 lives taken so 12 could continue. The kind of moral arithmetic that looked clean on paper but felt filthy in practice. Her father's voice, memory or imagination. Sometimes righteousness and guilt are the same thing, Maya. That's the weight we carry so others don't have to. She wondered if that made it easier for him, if Captain James Reeves had found peace with the cost of his choices, or if he'd carried them to his grave in Hugh City. She suspected the latter. Warriors didn't find peace with violence. They just learned to function despite it. Stone was on the radio with command, trying to explain a situation that made no sense in official language. Overwatch to actual, we have engaged unknown hostile force. 9 enemy KA source of fire was. He paused, looking up toward Maya's position. She could see him struggling with the words, with how to frame this in a way that wouldn't immediately end her career, even though they both knew her career was already over. Source of fire was Staff Sergeant Reeves with unauthorized equipment. Colonel Hendrick's voice crackled back, tight with controlled fury that carried clearly even through encrypted radio. Say again, Reeves engaged with what? Repeat your last transmission. 50 caliber sniper rifle, sir. Barrett M82. She brought it without authorization and used it to break the ambush. 9 confirmed enemy KIA at extended range under adverse conditions. Silence on the radio. Maya could imagine Hendricks processing this. An intelligence analyst who was supposed to be observing had instead killed 9 people with a weapon she wasn't cleared to possess, let alone employ. The paperwork alone would be catastrophic. The political fallout would be worse. And somewhere in a Pentagon office, someone was already calculating how to spin this into something that wouldn't destroy careers or expose whatever corruption had put them in this position. Finally, is the team intact? Garrett's wounded but stable. Rest of team is combat effective. Unknown force has withdrawn or been eliminated. Compound personnel have ceased fire and are requesting federal assistance. Extract immediately. Reeves is to be detained upon return. That's a direct order. No one speaks to media. No one files reports until I say so. Am I clear? Crystal, sir. Stone looked up at Maya's position again. Detained. The word carried weight. Court-martial. Leavenworth, maybe. At minimum, dishonorable discharge in the end of any future in military or law enforcement. Maximum, prison time for unauthorized use of deadly force, bringing prohibited weapons, exceeding rules of engagement. The charges would be creative and comprehensive. All because she'd saved 12 lives. Stone looked up at Maya's position again. Detained court-martial. The end of whatever was left of her career, all because she'd saved 8 lives and prevented a massacre that would have been blamed on the veterans her own government had failed. McAllister's voice, not over the radio, but close enough for Stone to hear. She knew exactly what it would cost, and she did it anyway. She violated orders, brought unauthorized equipment, engaged without clearance. She saved our lives. McAllister's tone made it clear this wasn't up for debate. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. That's a lesson some of us learned in wars you were too young to remember. Stone's jaw worked. The conflict playing out across his face was older than both of them. Duty versus conscience, rules versus results. The kind of choice that defined what kind of officer you were, what kind of man. He keyed the radio. Understood, actual, will comply. Moving to extract position now. Then he switched to team frequency. All elements, consolidate at rally point Alpha. Reeves returned to formation. Maya had already broken down the Barrett. The weapon was secured in her pack, invisible again. She'd cleaned the brass, policed her position, left no evidence except the bodies 800 meters away and the memory of thunder rolling through mountains. She moved down from her overwatch position with the same quiet competence she'd used to reach it. When she emerged from the tree line, the team was staring at her like she'd grown a second head. Doc Martinez had finished stabilizing Garrett, had him on his feet with support. The young petty officer was pale, hurting but alive. He looked at Maya with something approaching awe. "You saved my life." Maya's expression was neutral. The mask she'd learned to wear when the weight of what she'd done threatened to show. "That's the job." "The hell it is," McAllister stepped forward. "Your job was intelligence analysis. You decided it included precision elimination of 8 hostiles at ranges most snipers couldn't dream of achieving. Situation required capabilities beyond assigned parameters." Her voice was clinical, professional. The tone of someone filing an after-action report, not someone who just killed 8 men to save a dozen more. "I assessed and responded. With unauthorized equipment." Stone's voice held no judgment, just statement of fact. "Command wants you detained when we get back." "Understood, sir." The compound veterans were emerging from their positions. Cautious. Weapons ready but not aimed. They just watched federal operators kill contractors who'd been trying to kill them. The enemy of their enemy wasn't necessarily their friend, but in this moment, they weren't enemies either. Victor Krasinski limped forward. 65 years old, bad leg, eyes that had seen too much across too many wars. He looked at McAllister and something passed between them. Recognition. Brotherhood. The bond that existed between men who'd stood in the fire and somehow survived. "Wolf, James McAllister, I'll be damned." "Victor, it's been a long time." "Not long enough, apparently." Krasinski gestured at the bodies, the brass, the blood. "What the hell just happened here?" "That's what we're trying to figure out." McAllister nodded toward his team. "We were told you were domestic terrorists planning attacks on federal infrastructure." Krasinski laughed. Bitter sound, no humor in it. "Terrorists, right, because a bunch of broken old vets trying to help each other survive is terrorism now." "What is this place, really?" Krasinski gestured around the compound. "Exactly what it looks like. Support group for vets the VA gave up on. We pool resources, help with medical needs, PTSD counseling, job placement, basic survival. Built this compound because we needed somewhere to exist that wasn't asking us for rent we couldn't pay or pills we couldn't afford." He limped toward one of the buildings, McAllister following. Inside, the walls told stories. Photographs of deployments spanning 50 years, Vietnam through Afghanistan, young faces and old faces, and too many faces that would never age beyond the moment the camera captured them. A small library of books on trauma recovery, financial planning, legal assistance. A medical station with supplies that looked government surplus mixed with whatever they could afford. A kitchen that clearly fed communal meals. The infrastructure of survival built by people who'd learned the hard way that the system wouldn't save them. We got 16 regular residents, Krasinski continued, all former military. Ages range from 48 to 72. Combined service years probably exceed 300. Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, Silver Stars, even a Medal of Honor recipient. Tom Briggs, Marine, Vietnam, got his medal for saving 12 men under fire in Quezon. The VA denied his disability claim because they couldn't prove his PTSD was service-connected. McAllister's face hardened. That's criminal. That's bureaucracy. But yeah, it feels criminal to those of us living it. Krasinski sat heavily in a chair, his leg clearly paining him. After my wife died, I filed for benefits to cover her medical bills. Cancer treatment. We'd burned through our savings. I'd served 30 years. Figure the government owed me that much. They denied the claim, said spousal medical wasn't covered the way I'd filed. I appealed. They denied again. I filed a complaint about the appeals process. Someone flagged my file. Suddenly, I was getting denied for everything. Couldn't access VA hospitals, couldn't get disability review, couldn't even get my own medical records. He gestured at the other buildings, found out I wasn't alone, met other vets dealing with the same nightmare. We started helping each other, sharing resources. Then Tom's place got foreclosed. He had nowhere to go, so we pooled money, bought this land, built this compound, figured if the government wouldn't take care of us, we'd take care of each other. The weapons? Stone had joined them, listening with the intensity of someone whose worldview was being forcibly readjusted. All legal, registered, we're Americans. We have Second Amendment rights. Yeah, we've got more firepower than your average household. We're also vets who spent careers being armed and dangerous. Some of us have PTSD. Familiar tools provide comfort, structure, purpose. We maintain them, train with them, keep ourselves sharp. Is that a crime? Someone thinks it is. Someone wants this land. Krasinski pulled out a folder, legal documents, property assessments, development proposals. A company called Cascade Development wants to build luxury resort here. Mountain views, premium location. They've been buying up surrounding properties for 2 years. We're the last holdout. They've tried buying us out, tried legal pressure. When that didn't work, they got creative. He spread out documents, news clippings, social media posts, all carefully curated to make the compound look dangerous. They've been building a narrative, veterans stockpiling weapons, extremist rhetoric, threats against government. All bullshit, but it photographs well, gets headlines, creates public pressure for federal action. And Blackstone Security? Maya had descended from her position, Barrett secured but still visible. She was studying the documents with analyst eyes, seeing patterns. Blackstone is owned by Bradley Ashford, former congressman, sits on Cascade Development Board. They needed federal intervention but couldn't get it through normal channels. So they manufactured a terrorist threat, fed false intelligence to your chain of command, probably paid off someone in the intel pipeline to validate the reports. Then they send in their contractors to do the actual killing while real federal assets provide legitimacy. The picture was complete now. Not terrorism, not extremism, just greed wearing patriotism as camouflage. Veterans being expendable the moment they stop being useful. The oldest story in human conflict, dressed up in modern language and justified with manufactured threats. Stone was listening, processing. His face showed the exact moment when the mission brief stopped making sense and the reality became clear. They hadn't been sent to stop terrorists. They'd been sent to justify killing veterans who'd become inconvenient. Those contractors, Maya's voice cut through, who were they? Krasinski's expression darkened. Blackstone Security, private military, been harassing us for months. Property disputes, legal pressure, threats. Someone wants this land and we're in the way. Blackstone. McAllister pulled out his tactical tablet, started searching. Private military contractors, owned by... He stopped, read the name again, looked at Stone. Owned by former Congressman Bradley Ashford, who sits on the board of a development corporation that's been buying land in this area. The pieces were falling into place. Not a story about terrorism, a story about greed wearing patriotism as camouflage. About private interests using government assets to eliminate obstacles to profit. About veterans being expendable the moment they stopped being useful. Stone's radio crackled. Overwatch to all federal elements. Be advised, FBI hostage rescue team inbound your position. ETA 20 minutes. Do not engage compound personnel. Repeat, compound personnel are not to be engaged. Something about that transmission felt wrong. McAllister caught it first. That authorization came awful fast, like it was already planned. Or like someone's trying to clean up a mess before it gets messier. Maya had her tablet out, pulling up news feeds. Local news is already reporting federal raid on domestic terror cell. Armed standoff, multiple casualties. Story broke 10 minutes ago. How? We're in the middle of nowhere with no media presence. Someone fed the story before it happened. She kept scrolling. This was planned. The raid, the narrative, probably the body count too. Krasinski understood immediately. They were going to kill us all. Make it look like we fired first. Justify the whole thing as necessary federal response to domestic terrorism. And we walked right into it. Stone's voice was hollow. We were supposed to be here. Supposed to witness or participate. Legitimize the operation. McAllister looked at the bodies of Blackstone contractors. At the compound veterans who'd been defending their home. At his team caught between duty and truth. At Maya, who'd sacrificed her career because she'd recognized that sometimes doing your job meant refusing to do your job. We need to document everything right now before anyone can spin this. Doc Martinez was already moving, tactical camera out, photographing the scene. The contractor bodies with their non-government gear. The compound with its American flags and memorial gardens. The defensive positions that proved this had never been an offensive staging area. Stone was on the radio. Overwatch to actual. Situation is not as briefed. Compound is veteran support facility, not terrorist cell. Unknown hostile force was private military contractors. We have evidence of. The radio went dead. Not static, not interference, just silence. Someone had cut the frequency. They don't want us reporting. Maya's voice was flat. They want us silent until they can control the narrative. The sound of helicopters approached. Multiple birds. But something was wrong about the sound. McAllister, who'd spent 35 years riding helicopters into bad situations, recognized it immediately. Those aren't FBI Blackhawks. Those are civilian contracted birds. More Blackstone contractors. Coming to finish what the first team had started. Coming to eliminate witnesses. Coming to turn a failed ambush into the massacre it was supposed to be all along. Krasinski heard it too. Everyone inside, we can defend better from prepared positions. You'll be slaughtered. Stone was calculating the tactical reality. They'll have numbers, air support, probably heavy weapons. This compound wasn't designed to hold against sustained assault. Then we die defending our home. Krasinski's voice held no fear, just acceptance. Better than dying in a VA waiting room, waiting for benefits that never come. McAllister looked at his team, at Stone, at Maya, making a choice that would define the rest of whatever career he had left. We're not leaving you. We stand together. Master Chief, that's desertion. Stone's voice. But his hands were checking his weapon, preparing for the fight. His words saying one thing while his actions said another. Court-martial me later. Right now, help me prepare these positions. The helicopters were close now. 3 of them. Civilian contracted birds with Blackstone markings. They circled the compound once, assessors scanning for threats, finding a federal SEAL team that should have been allies positioned alongside the veterans they were supposed to eliminate. A voice boomed over helicopter loudspeaker. Federal agents, stand down. You are interfering with authorized federal operation. Withdraw immediately or be considered hostile. Stone grabbed a bullhorn from the compound's emergency supplies. This is Lieutenant Commander Derek Stone, United States Navy. You are not federal agents. Identify yourselves and stand down. Final warning, withdraw or be engaged. The helicopters began their approach. Door gunners visible, heavy weapons. This wasn't raid tactics. This was extermination. Maya had the Barrett out again. 2 rounds left in the magazine. Not enough, not nearly enough. But she'd learned long ago that enough was whatever you had when the moment required action. She found her position, elevated, concealed, line of sight to the approaching aircraft. Through her scope, she could see the pilot's face in the lead helicopter. Young, professional, doing his job, probably had no idea he was part of a massacre masquerading as justice. Her finger found the trigger, the familiar weight, the choice she'd made 8 times already and was preparing to make again. Then something changed. Over the radio, a new voice. Not Hendricks, not Blackstone, someone else. authority that carried weight beyond rank. All units, all elements. This is DoD Inspector General Actual. Ceasefire. I say again, all units cease fire. Federal warrant for Blackstone security has been issued. FBI is inbound with Justice Department oversight. No one moves, no one shoots. Everyone lives to explain themselves. The helicopters hesitated, hovered. The moment stretched like wire under tension. Either they'd comply or they'd commit. Either this ended in investigation or execution. The lead helicopter banked away. The others followed. Within seconds, they were gone, sound fading into mountains that had witnessed this entire disaster unfold. Silence fell, not peace, just the absence of immediate violence. Everyone still braced, still ready, still uncertain whether the next sound would be rotors or gunfire, or the voice of authority deciding who lived and who became a statistic in someone's report. Stone's radio crackled. Real FBI this time, verified frequencies, proper protocols. Federal team, this is FBI Special Agent Morrison. DOD and Justice Department are 10 minutes out. Secure the scene, render aid to wounded. Do not allow anyone to leave. We have questions. McAllister looked at Maya, at the Barrett still in her hands, at the choice she'd made that had cascaded into this moment where truth and lies were about to collide in ways that would determine whether any of them walked away free. Whatever happens next, he said quietly, you did the right thing. Don't let anyone tell you different. Maya safed the Barrett, began breaking it down, her hands steady, her conscience for the first time in 3 years beginning to quiet. Not peace, not yet, but the possibility of peace. The chance that maybe, just maybe, choosing to act instead of watch hadn't been the wrong choice after all. The sound of real federal helicopters approached. Justice, authority, investigation, the machinery of accountability grinding into motion. Slow, often corrupt, but present, witnessing, recording, making lies harder and truth harder to bury. Victor Krasinski stood beside McAllister watching the approach. Think they'll actually investigate or just bury this and bury us along with it? Depends on how much evidence we can get out before they lock it down. McAllister turned to Doc Martinez. Please tell me you got everything documented. Everything. Bodies, gear, contractor identification, compound layout, the whole scene, uploaded to secure cloud storage before they could jam our signals. Good man. The helicopters landed. Federal agents emerged. Real ones, with badges and authority and the kind of bureaucratic power that could either save them all or condemn them. Behind them, men in suits with Justice Department credentials. DOD Inspector General. The kind of oversight that showed up when something had gone so wrong that only sunlight could clean it up. Special Agent Morrison approached. 50-something, gray hair, eyes that had seen enough government corruption to be skeptical of everything. He looked at the SEAL team, at the veterans, at the contractor bodies, at Maya with her Barrett broken down but still visible. Someone want to tell me what the hell happened here? McAllister stepped forward, 35 years of service giving him the authority to speak. Domestic veterans were framed as terrorists. Private contractors attempted to execute them under cover of federal operation. We intervened. Staff Sergeant Reeves prevented a massacre. Morrison looked at Maya, at the .50 caliber rifle, with unauthorized equipment. Yes, sir. Knowing it would end your career. Yes, sir. Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to his team. Document everything, interview everyone. I want to know who authorized this operation, who funded it, who benefits from dead veterans. And someone get those contractors' bodies identified. They've got families who deserve to know their loved ones died working for people who turned them into war criminals. The investigation began. Hours of statements, photographs, evidence collection. The sun moved across the sky, while truth slowly assembled itself from blood and brass and testimony given by people who'd all chosen, in their own ways, to stand for something bigger than career or comfort or the easy lie. Maya sat on a boulder, Barrett beside her, watching justice grind slowly forward. Doc Martinez brought her coffee, MRE rations, the small acts of care that soldiers showed each other when words weren't enough. You okay? No, but I will be. Those 8 men you killed. They're going to haunt you. They already are. Join the other 47. We'll have quite a crowd at 3 in the morning. Doc sat beside her. 52 years old, 28 years as a Navy corpsman. He'd seen enough trauma to recognize it in others. You know what I've learned? The ones who carry guilt are the ones who still have souls. The dangerous ones are those who sleep easy after killing. Not sure that's comforting? It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be true. They sat in silence, watching the investigation, watching justice attempt to catch up with events that had moved faster than policy could account for. Watching the sun decline toward mountains that had seen all of this before and would see it again. War and truth and the cost of choosing right over easy. Lieutenant Commander Stone approached. His face showed the weight of decisions made under fire. Choices that would define his career one way or another. Justice Department wants your statement. They're particularly interested in your decision to engage with unauthorized equipment. I'll tell them the truth. The truth is you violated orders, brought prohibited gear, and killed 8 American citizens without clearance. The truth is I prevented a massacre. Sometimes those truths exist together. Stone nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm putting in my report that your actions saved lives and prevented a federal crime. Whether that matters, he shrugged, above my pay grade. Appreciate it, sir. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. Blackstone's got political connections, former congressmen, defense contractors, the kind of power that buries investigations and ruins careers. Then I guess they're about to find out what happens when they try to bury someone who's already dead inside. Maya's voice was quiet, certain. They can't threaten me with losing what I already lost. Can't scare me with consequences I already paid. All they can do is try. And I'm really tired of people trying. McAllister had been listening. He stepped closer. You're not alone in this. Whatever comes next, you've got brothers standing beside you. Master Chief, you're about to retire. Don't throw that away for me. I'm not throwing it away. I'm deciding what it meant. 35 years of service. It has to stand for something. Might as well be this. Might as well be choosing truth over career. Might as well be standing beside someone who reminded me what honor actually looks like. The words hung in the mountain air, truth and commitment and the kind of brotherhood that transcended rank or regulation. The thing that made warriors out of soldiers. That turned orders into choices and choices into legacy. The sun was setting when the Justice Department finished initial interviews. They'd be back. There would be hearings, investigations, media, political pressure from people who needed this story to be about terrorism instead of corruption. But for now, in this moment, the truth existed in documented form. Evidence that couldn't be easily buried. Testimony that would be hard to spin. Special Agent Morrison found Maya as she was packing her gear. The Barrett secured, the brass collected, the scene documented. Everything a professional operator did after the shooting stopped. Sergeant Reeves, you're not being detained yet, but don't leave the state. Justice is going to want extensive testimony. Understood, sir. Off the record? He looked around, making sure they were alone. I've been investigating federal corruption for 23 years. Seen a lot of people do wrong things for right reasons. Seen more do wrong things for wrong reasons. What you did today, that's going to complicate your life in ways you can't imagine yet. It already has, sir. Yeah, I imagine it has. He studied her, seeing something that made him nod slightly. You know what, though? 10 years from now, you'll be able to look yourself in the mirror. That's worth something. Maybe not worth a career, but worth something. He walked away, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts and her choices and the weight of 9 more ghosts that would join 47 others at 3 in the morning. But also with something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose. The sense that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally done the right thing. That choosing to act instead of watch had been the choice her father would have recognized. The choice that honored what the uniform was supposed to mean before politics and profit had corrupted the promise. The SEAL team prepared to extract. Garrett was stable enough to move. Doc had done good work. The young petty officer would heal. Would carry scars but would live to tell stories about the day an intelligence analyst became a warrior and an old master chief remembered why he'd stayed in the fight for 35 years. They loaded into helicopters, real federal birds this time, with proper authority and clean intentions, and pilots who flew for justice instead of profit. Victor Krasinski and his veterans watched them go, safe for now, protected by evidence and testimony, and the sudden spotlight that made convenient massacres impossible. As the helicopter lifted away from the compound, away from the battlefield, away from the choice that had changed everything, Maya looked back at the mountains, at the place where she'd pulled a trigger 9 times and saved 12 lives, and maybe, just maybe, saved herself in the process. Master Chief James McAllister sat across from her, 58 years old, one final mission complete, except it wasn't final anymore. This was just beginning. The investigation, the hearings, the fight to make sure truth survived contact with power. He met her eyes, nodded once. Warrior to warrior, brother to sister in arms. The bond that came from standing together when standing together cost everything. And in that moment, Maya understood something her father had tried to teach her before he died in Hugh City before she was born. That courage wasn't absence of fear, that honor wasn't following orders, that the right thing was often the hard thing, and that some choices defined you in ways that no citation or commendation or career could ever match. She'd killed 9 men today, would carry them forever, but she'd also saved 12, had chosen truth over career, had become finally the warrior her father had been, not perfect, not spotless, but present, accountable, willing to pay the cost of doing right when doing right required sacrifice. The helicopter flew toward Fort Lewis, toward investigation and consequence, and whatever came next. Behind them, the sun set over mountains that held secrets and blood and the truth that would either set them free or bury them all. But for now, in this moment, they were alive, together, bearing witness to each other's choices, carrying each other's burdens, being in the way that mattered most, exactly what the uniform had always promised they could be. Warriors who remembered that some things were worth fighting for, some truths worth protecting, some lives worth saving. Even when the cost was everything you'd built and all you had left to lose. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. But Maya Reeves, for the first time in 3 years, felt ready for whatever came next. Because this time she wasn't running from ghosts. She was standing with brothers. And that made all the difference. Fort Lewis felt different in daylight. The mountains that had witnessed violence now watched judgment unfold with the same indifferent patience they'd shown for millennia. 48 hours since the firefight. 48 hours of statements and interviews and the slow grinding machinery of federal investigation determining who would be held accountable and who would walk away clean. Maya sat in a gray interrogation room that smelled like stale coffee and institutional disinfectant. Across the table, 3 people who would decide her future. Special Agent Morrison from the FBI, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Chen from the Judge Advocate General Corps, and a man in civilian clothes who'd introduced himself as Marcus Webb, Department of Defense Inspector General. They'd been at this for 16 hours over 2 days. Every shot, every decision, every moment from the insertion to the extraction. They wanted details that Maya had spent 11 years learning to provide. Range, wind, target assessment, justification for each trigger pull. The clinical language of after-action reports applied to 9 lives ended by her hand. Walk me through kill number 7 again. Chen's voice was professionally neutral. She was 40-something, probably combat vet herself from the way she understood tactical realities. You engaged a retreating target at 780 meters. Why? He wasn't retreating, he was repositioning. Still armed. Still a threat to compound personnel. But his back was to you. His weapon was oriented toward American veterans. Direction he was facing was irrelevant to threat assessment. Chen made a note. Webb leaned forward. 60-something. Gray hair, eyes that had seen enough government corruption to be professionally skeptical of everything. Staff Sergeant Reeves, let's talk about the Barrett M82. How long have you had it in your possession? 3 years, sir, since Kabul. And in those 3 years, did you ever think to report that you were retaining unauthorized equipment? Maya met his eyes, no flinching, no apology. No, sir. Why not? Because I knew there would be situations where having it mattered more than following regulations about equipment accountability. That's not your call to make. With respect, sir, it was exactly my call to make. The moment I decided that preventing a massacre was more important than my career, it became my call. Webb studied her. Something shifted in his expression. Not approval exactly, recognition maybe. The look of someone who'd made hard choices himself and understood the weight. You understand you're facing court-martial, multiple charges, unauthorized equipment, exceeding rules of engagement, possibly even murder if the wrong prosecutor gets assigned. Yes, sir. And you'd do it again. It wasn't a question, but Maya answered anyway. Every single time, 9 lives taken, 12 lives saved, Victor Krasinski and 15 veterans who the VA failed. Master Chief McAllister and 7 SEALs. If the price for that arithmetic is my career, I consider it a bargain. Morrison spoke up. He'd been quiet for most of the interview, just listening. What about the 17 people in Ankara? The ones who died because you saved your spotter instead of taking the shot in Kabul? The question hit like a physical blow. Maya's hands, steady through 16 hours of interrogation, trembled slightly. The weight she'd carried for 3 years. The arithmetic that never balanced. 1 life saved, 17 lost. The choice that had destroyed her. I carry them every day, sir. Every night at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes. They're why I brought the Barrett to the Cascades. Why I couldn't watch another massacre happen. Couldn't let more people die because I chose to observe instead of act. And if I told you that those 17 deaths had nothing to do with your choice in Kabul, Maya's world tilted. Sir? Morrison pulled out a file. Classified markings, eyes-only documentation. The chemist escaped Kabul, true, built another lab, also true. But the Ankara attack wasn't his work. Different chemical signature, different methodology, different terrorist cell entirely. The timing made everyone assume connection. But our forensics finally confirmed 3 months ago. Separate attacks, separate actors. The chemist is still out there, still a threat. But those 17 people, they didn't die because of your choice. The room was spinning. 3 years of guilt, 3 years of nightmares, 3 years of carrying weight that wasn't hers to carry. Maya heard herself speaking, but the voice sounded distant. Sullivan knows this? We briefed him yesterday. He asked us to tell you personally, said you'd been punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. Said maybe this would help you understand that saving his life wasn't the wrong choice. It was just a choice. And those 17 people died because terrorists are evil, not because you're human. Maya's hands were shaking harder now. Not from fear, from the sudden absence of weight. 3 years of certainty crumbling. The foundation she'd built her self-hatred on revealed as faulty. She'd saved Sullivan and it hadn't cost 17 lives. Had just cost the target. Just cost her career with JSOC. Just cost 3 years of believing she was a monster who'd chosen wrong. Chen was watching her carefully. Staff Sergeant, do you need a break? No, ma'am, I need to finish this. They went through the rest. The decision to engage. The tactical necessity of each shot. The evidence that Blackstone Security had been operating as an illegal paramilitary force under cover of federal authority. The paper trail connecting former Congressman Bradley Ashford to the land grab that had required dead veterans to complete. By hour 18, they were done. Chen closed her notebook. Morrison gathered his files. Webb stood, joints creaking, in a way that said old injuries from old wars. Sergeant Reeves, off the record, what you did in those mountains saved lives and exposed corruption that goes deeper than you know. We've got 8 members of Congress under investigation. Federal contracts being reviewed, a private military company facing RICO charges. You opened a door we'd been trying to breach for years. On the record, sir? On the record, you violated multiple regulations and exceeded your authority. Court-martial proceedings will begin in 30 days. I'd recommend you get a good lawyer. He paused at the door, looked back. For what it's worth, I hope you beat it. Military needs more people willing to do right thing over easy thing. God knows we've got enough of the other kind. They left her alone in the gray room. 16 hours of interrogation complete. Her future uncertain. Her career effectively over regardless of court-martial outcome. But for the first time in 3 years, the weight at 3 a.m. might be a little lighter. Might not include 17 people who died for reasons that had nothing to do with her choice on a Kabul rooftop. The door opened again. Not interrogators this time. Master Chief James McAllister, in dress uniform, looking like he'd aged a decade in 2 days. They done with you? For now. Good, because there's someone here to see you. He stepped aside. A man in a wheelchair rolled through the door. 55, weathered face, eyes that knew combat. Strong upper body, legs that didn't work anymore but hadn't stopped him from living. Thomas Sullivan, Ghost, her former spotter, the man she'd saved in Kabul. The choice that had cost her everything and apparently nothing at the same time. Hey, Maya, she couldn't speak. 3 years since she'd seen him, 3 years of avoiding contact because seeing him meant confronting her choice, meant acknowledging what she'd sacrificed for his life, meant facing the man who represented her greatest success and deepest failure. Except it hadn't been failure. Morrison had just proved that. They told you, Sullivan's voice was gentle, understanding, about Ankara. Yeah, I've known for 3 months. Wanted to tell you, but they asked me to wait until the investigation confirmed everything. Wanted you to hear it officially, not from a broken old spotter who couldn't protect you on a rooftop. You were shot. You didn't fail to protect me. And you saved my life, carried me off that roof, engaged 6 hostiles, got me to extraction. I'm alive because you chose me over the mission. That's not something I take lightly. He rolled closer. For 3 years, I've watched you destroy yourself over a choice that saved my life. Watched you carry guilt that wasn't yours. Tried to reach out, but you wouldn't answer. Wouldn't talk. Just disappeared into a desk job like you were punishing yourself by being useless. I was useless until the Cascades. You were never useless. You were processing, healing, figuring out who you were when you weren't pulling triggers. That's not useless. That's human. He gestured at his wheelchair. I've had 3 years to figure out who I am when I can't walk. It's hard, but it's also necessary. You needed time. You took it. Now you're back. Back to what? Court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison maybe. Back to being Ghost, the warrior who makes impossible shots because someone has to. The woman who saved my life in Kabul and saved 12 more in the Cascades. The soldier who remembers that some things matter more than regulations. McAllister spoke from the doorway. He's right, you're not done yet, neither am I. Master Chief, you are retired. Forced retirement. They took it from you because you stood with me. They took nothing. I chose to stand. That's the point. Service doesn't end because they stop paying you. It ends when you stop believing it matters. I spent 35 years in uniform. I'll spend however long I've got left making sure those years meant something. The door opened wider. Lieutenant Commander Stone, Doc Martinez, young Ryan Garrett, arm in a sling but grinning. The team, her brothers, standing together like they'd stood in the forest when standing together had cost everything. Stone spoke first. They reprimanded me. Formal letter in my file. Probably end of my career advancement. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is letting you face court-martial alone. Doc Martinez nodded. I've been Navy 28 years. I've seen a lot of people do wrong things. I've seen fewer do right things. You did right. I'm testifying to that. Whatever it takes. Garrett stepped forward, earnest, young, still believing the system worked. You saved my life, Sergeant. I'm not letting them punish you for that. My dad's a defense attorney. JAG. He's taking your case, pro bono. Says it's the most righteous cause he's seen in 30 years. Maya looked at them. At the brothers who'd shown up when showing up meant risking everything. At Sullivan, who she'd saved and who'd spent 3 years trying to save her back. At McAllister, who'd given up retirement rather than abandon her to consequences. Why risk yourselves for me? McAllister's answer was simple, final, the kind of truth that didn't need elaboration. Because that's what warriors do. We stand together, especially when standing together is hard. That's the only thing that matters in the end, not rank, not regulations, not careers, just the promise that no one stands alone who stood for us. The weight Maya had carried for 3 years was transforming, not disappearing, just changing shape, becoming something bearable, shared. The arithmetic of grief divided among brothers who understood that some costs were meant to be carried together. 3 months later, Maya stood in a congressional hearing room that smelled like old wood and older power. Cameras, media, senators who'd built careers on national security suddenly very interested in how a land development deal had nearly resulted in a federal massacre of American veterans. Senator Catherine Morrison, no relation to the FBI agent, presided. 70-something, steel gray hair, voice that had been questioning government officials since before Maya was born. Staff Sergeant Reeves, you used unauthorized equipment to engage American citizens. 9 kills, ranges exceeding 800 meters. In your own words, explain why the committee shouldn't recommend court-martial. Maya had prepared for this. Garrett's father, Commander Robert Garrett, JAG, had coached her for 3 weeks. Stay calm, stick to facts, don't get emotional, make them understand the choice without making it sound like you do anything wrong. But standing there, facing cameras and senators and the weight of judgment, Maya found herself unable to follow the script, found herself speaking truth instead of strategy. Senator, I can't tell you that you shouldn't recommend court-martial. That's your decision. What I can tell you is what happened in those mountains and why I made the choices I made. She detailed it. The mission, the veterans who'd been framed, the Blackstone contractors, the three-way firefight, Garrett wounded, the arithmetic of death that said everyone was going to unless someone changed the equation. I had a Barrett M82 50 caliber rifle, unauthorized, illegal for me to possess. I'd kept it for 3 years because some part of me knew there'd come a moment when having it mattered more than following rules. That moment came when I watched good men about to die for corporate profit dressed up as counterterrorism. So you decided to play God. Senator Marcus Webb, different Webb than the DOD Inspector General, conservative Republican from Texas who'd made his name on law and order, decided you knew better than command, better than the legal system, took 9 lives without trial or due process. No, sir, I decided to be a soldier, to protect American lives from illegal combatants operating under false federal authority. Those contractors were executing American veterans. I stopped them. That's not playing God. That's doing my job. Your job was intelligence analysis. My job is whatever the situation requires to prevent American deaths. That day it required precision rifle fire. I had the capability. I used it. If that's criminal, then every sniper in history is a criminal. Every soldier who pulled a trigger without filling out the proper forms first. Webb's face reddened. You're comparing yourself to legitimate combat operations. I'm comparing myself to soldiers who did what needed doing when procedure would have gotten people killed. That's all combat operations, sir. Legitimate or otherwise. Senator Morrison intervened. Staff Sergeant, the committee has reviewed extensive testimony from your team, from the veterans you saved, from DOD Inspector General, from FBI forensics. The evidence is clear that Blackstone Security was operating an illegal paramilitary force, that they'd manufactured intelligence to justify federal action, that without your intervention we'd be investigating a massacre instead of corruption. She paused, looked at the other senators. Some nodded, some looked uncomfortable. Webb looked furious. Morrison continued, it's also clear that you violated regulations, retained unauthorized equipment, exceeded your operational parameters, used lethal force without proper clearance. These are serious charges, however. The word hung in the air, heavy with possibility. However, given the circumstances, given the lives saved, given the corruption exposed, this committee recommends the following. Honorable discharge with full benefits. No court-martial, no criminal charges. You will never serve in military or federal law enforcement capacity again. But you will leave with your honor intact and your service recognized. Maya felt the room shift. Not victory exactly. She was still losing her career, still being forced out, but honorably, with recognition instead of condemnation, with closure instead of limbo. Additionally, Morrison continued, this committee recommends full review of private military contractor oversight, federal charges against Blackstone Security and Bradley Ashford, whistleblower protections for Victor Krasinski and veterans who exposed the land grab, and commendations for Master Chief McAllister and SEAL Team 7 for standing with you when institutional pressure said to abandon you. Webb objected. Senator, this sets dangerous precedent. We can't have soldiers deciding which regulations to follow. We also can't have soldiers watching Americans die because regulations prohibited saving them. Staff Sergeant Reeves made a choice. This committee is making a choice too. We choose to recognize that sometimes doing right means breaking wrong rules. The gavel fell. Decision rendered. Maya's military career was over, but she could look in the mirror, could answer her father's ghost when it asked whether she'd honored what the uniform was supposed to mean, could finally breathe at 3 a.m. without wondering if she was a monster. Outside the hearing room, Sullivan waited, standing now, not wheelchair, prosthetic leg braces, DARPA experimental technology that gave him back mobility he'd thought lost forever. You walked, started 2 months ago, experimental spinal nerve implant. Turns out when you've got nothing to lose, you volunteer for medical trials. They needed someone with complete spinal transection. I needed to stop being helpless. Trade worked out. He took a few careful steps. Not graceful, not easy, but walking, being vertical, having agency over his own movement in ways he'd lost on a cobble rooftop 3 years ago. You saved my life twice, Maya. Once when you carried me off that roof, Once when you showed me that broken doesn't mean useless, that there's purpose beyond the trigger. What are you doing now? The counselor, working with vets who've got PTSD, traumatic injuries, transition problems, using my experience to help them process theirs. It's not combat, but it matters, maybe matters more. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've been a soldier for 11 years. It's all I know. Then learn something new. You've got time, you've got support, you've got brothers who won't let you fall through the cracks like the system let Victor and his veterans fall. He gestured at the hearing room. You just beat Congress. Pretty sure civilian life won't be any harder. 6 months slid by like water finding its level. Maya had an apartment now, bigger than before, windows that let in light, furniture that wasn't military issue, small steps toward being a person instead of a soldier. The transition was harder than expected. Civilian employment wanted credentials she didn't have. Her skill set, precision elimination of targets at extended range, wasn't exactly marketable outside military and law enforcement, both now close to her. But she found work. VA hospital in Seattle, peer counseling for veterans with PTSD. She understood that battlefield intimately. The nightmares, the guilt, the weight of lives taken and lives lost. 3 a.m. became her specialty, the hour when everyone's demons came visiting. She'd be there in the hospital's quiet rooms, talking with vets who couldn't sleep, who saw faces, who wondered if they were monsters. You're not a monster, she'd tell them. Words she'd needed to hear herself, words Sullivan had said, words she was learning to believe. You did what the situation required. That makes you a warrior, not a monster. Warriors carry weight. That's our burden, but we carry it together. Sullivan ran the PTSD group therapy sessions. Maya assisted. Between them, they had 17 deployments, 56 confirmed kills, more trauma than most people accumulated in lifetimes. They'd earned their credentials in blood and fire instead of classroom and clinic. The vets who came to their sessions knew it, recognized kindred spirits, trusted in a way they'd never trust civilian counselors who'd never pulled a trigger. One Thursday evening, Maya was facilitating when an older vet walked in. Mid-60s, weathered face, Marine Corps tattoo fading on his forearm. He looked at her with recognition that went both ways. You're that sniper, the one from the Cascades. Yes, sir. You saved Victor and the boys. Heard about it through the network. Most of us who've been abandoned by the system, we stay in touch. Make sure nobody falls through alone. Victor doing okay? Better than okay. He's working with some retired Navy guy, building something up in Montana, training facility, teaching civilians and vets, survival skills, tactics, but also philosophy. When to fight, when to walk away, when the right thing matters more than the legal thing. He sat down, looked around at the circle of vets, young and old, men and women, all branches, all eras, united by service and trauma, in the understanding that some things civilians would never grasp. I'm here because 40 years ago in Vietnam, I did things that still visit me at 0300, because the VA gave me pills but never gave me purpose. Because I've been waiting to die for 2 decades and figured maybe before I go, I should try to figure out why I'm still here. Maya understood that purpose question, that wondering whether survival was gift or curse. She'd been asking herself the same thing until the Cascades, until 9 trigger pulls had somehow transformed guilt into meaning. You're still here because your story isn't finished, she said, because there's someone you haven't helped yet. Someone who needs to hear from a survivor that survival is possible, that carrying weight doesn't mean you're weak, that 40 years later you can still find purpose. The old Marine looked at her, eyes wet. You believe that? I'm learning to, with help from people who wouldn't let me give up when giving up felt easier than going on. The session continued, stories shared, weight distributed among brothers and sisters who understood that some burdens were meant for many shoulders instead of one. By the time they finished, the old Marine was standing straighter, not healed. Healing was a lifetime project, but hopeful. That was enough for one night. Outside, Sullivan caught up with Maya. You're good at this, better than I expected. It's different than shooting. It's the same philosophy. Identify the threat, engage with precision, eliminate what's trying to kill them. Except now the threat is despair instead of enemy combatants. Still saving lives, just using different tools. Is it enough? Does this matter as much? Ask that Marine who walked in ready to die and walked out willing to try. Ask yourself if what we did tonight was worth doing. I think you'll find the answers the same as asking if the Cascades were worth your career. 1 year after the Cascades, Maya drove to Montana. The address Victor had sent her led to mountains that looked like the ones where everything had changed. But these mountains held something different. Not violence, purpose. The training facility sprawled across 40 acres of pristine wilderness. Buildings constructed with care, ranges for rifles and pistols, obstacle courses, medical training stations, a large lodge that served as classroom and gathering space. American flags flew alongside Marine, Navy, Army, Air Force banners. Unity through service. Master Chief James McAllister stood outside the main lodge, 59 now, retired 1 year, looking healthier than he had in uniform, like shedding the weight of institutional obligation had given him room to breathe. Welcome to the last good fight. That what you're calling this? Working title. Tommy suggested it, my grandson. He's been helping build. Kid's 9 years old now, thinks his grandpa's starting a warrior school. He's not wrong. Inside, the lodge revealed its purpose. Not military, not paramilitary. Something else. Walls covered with photographs, service members from every era. Vietnam through Afghanistan, young faces and old faces. Reminders of what they were teaching and why it mattered. Lieutenant Commander Derek Stone emerged from an office, no longer wearing uniform, civilian clothes, but still carrying himself like an officer. Some things didn't change just because the uniform came off. Maya, good to see you. You're part of this? Co-director. Turns out getting reprimanded and career capped gives you perspective on what actually matters. Building something that helps people matters more than climbing rank structure that was going to force me out at 20 years anyway. Doc Martinez appeared from the medical station. 29 years since he joined Navy. 1 year since he'd retired alongside McAllister. Still the team's conscience. Still making sure everyone was taking care of themselves before they took care of others. We're teaching comprehensive tactical medicine, not just battlefield trauma, long-term care, mental health first aid, suicide prevention, the whole spectrum of keeping warriors alive, not just during combat but after. Ryan Garrett bounded in like the puppy he'd been a year ago, 27 now. Medical separation from the Navy after his shoulder injury wouldn't fully heal, but discharged honorably. Whole career ahead of him, and apparently spending it here. Sergeant Reeves, check this out. He led her to the rifle range. We're teaching precision shooting, not just marksmanship. Philosophy of when to shoot and when not to shoot. Ethics of force. All the things SEAL training glossed over in favor of making us efficient killers. Maya watched him demonstrate, teaching 3 students, civilians who'd paid for the course. One was a young woman, mid-20s, who handled the rifle with natural competence. Another was a man in his 50s, veteran of something from the way he moved. The third was a teenager, maybe 17, learning because his father had been military and wanted him to understand the responsibility before the capability. We get all types, McAllister explained. Veterans looking for structure after transition. Civilians wanting to understand what service means. Young people trying to figure out if they want to follow family tradition. We teach them all the same thing. Skills matter, but judgment matters more. Victor Krasinski limped over, still favoring his bad leg, but moving better than he had in the Cascades. Purpose had done what medicine couldn't, given him reason to push through pain instead of surrendering to it. Maya, been waiting for you, got something to show you. He led her to a memorial garden, stone cairns marking remembrance instead of graves, names carved into granite. Veterans who'd been lost to suicide, addiction, system failure. The ones who hadn't survived transition, who'd fallen through cracks that organizations like this were designed to prevent. We remember them here, not to glorify death, to remind ourselves why this matters. Every student we train, every vet we help transition, every person who learns that being a warrior means knowing when not to fight. That's one less name we have to add to this wall. Among the names, Maya saw one that stopped her breath. Captain James Reeves, her father. Killed in Hughes City before she was born. The man whose dog tag she still wore. Whose memory had driven her to service. Whose legacy she'd spent 30 years trying to honor. How did you know? Sullivan told me. About your dad, about why you became a sniper. Figured he belonged here. Among warriors who gave everything, reminding us what we're fighting to prevent. Maya touched the carved name. Her father's legacy, preserved in stone in a place dedicated to making sure other warriors didn't have to die to prove their worth. Making sure service meant something beyond sacrifice. That surviving the war wasn't the end of purpose, but the beginning. That evening, the team gathered around a fire pit behind the main lodge. McAllister, Stone, Doc Martinez, Garrett, Victor, and Maya, brothers and sister. Warriors who'd stood together when standing together had cost everything and somehow ended up here, building something that might actually matter. McAllister passed a flask, whiskey, old tradition, shared drink among survivors. To absent companions. They echoed it, toast to the dead, to the ones who hadn't made it, to Rodriguez and Tom Briggs, and the old Marine from Maya's PTSD group, and Captain James Reeves, and all the others whose names lived in memory in stone. Think we're making a difference? Garrett asked, young enough to need reassurance that effort mattered. Think this changes anything? Doc Martinez answered, we've trained 200 students in the past year, helped 40 veterans transition to civilian life, prevented 3 suicides that we know of, probably more we don't, gave Victor and his group a legitimate organization to channel their energy. That's not changing the world, but it's changing worlds, individual worlds. That's enough. Stone added, the system's still broken, VA's still failing people. Private military contractors are still out there cutting corners. Congress passed some reforms after the hearings, but corporations always find new angles. We're not fixing the system. We're building alternatives for people the system fails. Is that enough? Maya heard herself ask, compared to what we were? What we did? McAllister considered this. The firelight catching on his face made him look ancient and ageless simultaneously. Warrior at rest but never retired, never truly done. When I was your age, I thought an impact meant body count. Missions completed, enemies eliminated, spent 35 years measuring success in kills and objectives. Then I stood in a forest watching you save 12 lives by taking 9. Watched institutional power try to punish you for doing right. Realized that maybe the biggest impact we can have isn't on the battlefield. It's on the people who come after, teaching them to be warriors who remember they're human first. He looked around the fire, at the people he'd assembled here. This facility, what we're building, it's not combat, but it's service. Maybe the most important kind. Because every person we help is one less casualty of the transition between warrior and civilian. One less name on Victor's memorial wall. One less family destroyed because the system threw someone away after using them up. A young instructor approached, female, early 30s, moving with professional competence. Former Army from her bearing. She spoke to McAllister quietly, but Maya overheard. Sir, the Morrison family just arrived. Sarah and the kids. McAllister's face lit up. My daughter drove up from Seattle with my grandkids. Tommy's thinking about enrolling in the junior program when he's older. Wants to learn what Grandpa does. He stood. Come meet them, all of you. This is what we're fighting for. Not tactics or skills. Legacy. Making sure the next generation understands that being strong means knowing when to be gentle. That weapons are tools, not identities. That the warrior tradition is about protection, not destruction. They followed him to the parking area. A minivan, somehow both suburban and practical. Sarah emerged, 33 now, with 2 children. Tommy, 9 years old, still small but already showing signs of the man he'd become. And a daughter Maya hadn't known about. Emma, 6, with her grandfather's eyes and a book tucked under her arm. Sarah hugged her father, long embrace that spoke of years of absence forgiven but not forgotten. Dad, the place looks amazing. It's coming together. Still got work to do, always will, but it's becoming what we envisioned. Tommy was staring at Maya with undisguised awe, teenage boy confronting legend. Are you Ghost, the sniper from the news? I was, now I'm just Maya. Just? His voice cracked. You made impossible shots, saved Master Chief, took on Congress. You're like a superhero. Maya knelt to his level, eye to eye, stripping away mythology to reveal reality. I'm a person who made hard choices and paid hard prices. Who learned that pulling triggers is easy compared to living with consequences. Your grandfather is the hero. He spent 35 years serving without needing recognition, without needing to be legendary, just being present, being solid, being someone his brothers could count on. That's harder than any shot I ever made. Emma tugged on Maya's sleeve. Did killing people make you sad? The question landed like a punch. 9-year-old honesty cutting through adult evasion. Sarah started to apologize, but Maya stopped her. Yes, very sad. Every time. That's how you know you're doing it for right reasons. If killing didn't make you sad, you'd be a monster. Sadness means you still care. Still remember that every target was a person. That's important. Then why do it? Because sometimes bad people are trying to hurt good people. And if you have the ability to stop them, you have responsibility to stop them. But you also have responsibility to remember what it kicked in, to carry that weight so the people you save don't have to. Emma considered this, nodded slowly. Like vaccines, they hurt, but they stop you getting sick. Maya smiled. 9 years old and already understanding moral complexity better than most adults. Exactly like vaccines. McAllister gathers them all, family and warriors, blood relations and chosen brothers. This is why we're here. This is what matters. Not the facility, not the reputation, not even the students we train. It's making sure that Tommy and Emma's generation understands what service actually means. That strength includes gentleness. That capability includes restraint. That being a warrior means knowing when not to fight. They spent the evening together, stories and laughter and the kind of easy companionship that came from shared understanding. Tommy pestered everyone for war stories, getting heavily edited versions that emphasized teamwork and consequence over glory and violence. Emma read her book, occasionally asking devastating questions that reminded adults why honesty with children mattered more than comfort. As darkness fell, Sarah found Maya alone on the lodge porch. Thank you for what you said to Tommy about my dad being the hero. He needed to hear that from someone he considers legendary. Your father is legendary, just not the kind that gets movies made about it. The quiet kind, the solid kind, the kind that shows up every day for 35 years without needing applause. He talks about you, about the Cascades, about watching you make an impossible choice knowing what it would cost. Says it reminded him why he stayed in so long, why it mattered. I ended his career, forced him into retirement. You gave him purpose after career. This facility, what he's building with Victor and Stone and the others, it's what he's been looking for his whole life. Teaching instead of doing. Passing wisdom instead of just executing missions. You didn't end anything. You showed him what came next. Sarah looked at the mountains, at the facility her father had built, at the legacy taking shape in timber and stone and careful teaching. My grandfather, his dad, came back from Vietnam broken, spent my dad's childhood fighting demons, died before they were beaten. Dad spent his career trying to honor that memory, trying to be the kind of warrior his father might have been if the war hadn't destroyed him. This place, it's his way of making sure other families don't lose their warriors to the darkness after the fighting stops. Maya understood. Legacy wasn't about glory, wasn't about medals or citations or congressional hearings. It was about the lives you touched, the people you helped, the chain of healing you started that rippled forward into generations you'd never meet. Your kids are lucky. They've got a grandfather who understands that strength means knowing when to be gentle. They are. And so are all the people who come through here learning from warriors who remember they're human. 3 months later, Maya stood in Arlington National Cemetery. Rows of white headstones stretching to horizon. Every one a story, every one a sacrifice, every one a reminder of cost. She found her father's grave, Captain James Reeves, USMC, born 1945, died 1968. 23 years old when enemy fire had found him in Hughes City, younger than Maya was now. He'd never seen her, never held her, never known she'd followed his path. McAllister stood beside her, visiting his own father's grave 2 rows over. Vietnam generation buried together. Brotherhood extending beyond death. You think they'd be proud, what we've become? Maya placed her hand on her father's stone, cold granite under her palm, solid, permanent, unlike the man it commemorated. I think my dad would understand why I made the choices I made. Saving Sullivan, the 9 kills in the Cascades, choosing people over policy. He did the same in Hughes City, got his whole squad out alive by staying behind, made the same arithmetic I made, his life for theirs. And the facility, the teaching, he'd say it matters more than the fighting, that preventing wars is harder than winning them, that raising warriors who know when not to fight is the most important mission. They walked together through the cemetery, past stones marking service spanning centuries, past the known and unknown, Past glory and anonymity, all equal in death, all remembered in stone. I've been thinking about purpose, McAllister said. Spent 35 years in uniform. 1 year building the facility. The facility year has meant more, helped more people, made bigger impact. Makes me wonder what I was doing all those years in service. You were preparing, learning, building the wisdom you're teaching now. You couldn't teach what you're teaching without living what you lived. The 35 years weren't wasted. They were training for this. You believe that? I have to. Otherwise, my 11 years pulling triggers were just violence. But if they prepared me to help veterans process their trauma, to prevent suicides, to teach that carrying weight doesn't mean you're broken, then maybe they mattered. Maybe all of it, the good and the terrible, was preparing us for what comes next. They reached the exit, the living leaving the dead after paying respects. Behind them, stone and memory. Ahead, whatever years remained and whatever they could build with them. You're coming back to Montana, McAllister said. It wasn't a question. Facility needs a sniper instructor, someone who can teach the philosophy, not just the skills. Someone who understands that every trigger pull costs something, and that cost matters. I'm helping veterans in Seattle, the PTSD work with Sullivan. Bring him too. We need mental health professionals, real ones who've been in the fire. Build it together, the physical training and mental health support. Complete package. That's the vision. Maya looked back at the cemetery, at her father's stone, at the legacy of warriors who'd given everything and sometimes more than they had to give. Thought about Emma's vaccine metaphor, pain that prevented greater pain, cost that prevented greater cost. Yeah, okay, we'll come. Build something that makes all of this mean something more than just survival. They drove back toward Montana, toward mountains and purpose in the work that mattered more than medals or recognition or the approval of institutions that forgot warriors the moment they stopped being useful. The war wasn't over, would never be over, would continue in the hearts of everyone who'd seen combat, everyone who'd pulled triggers, everyone who carried weight that civilians couldn't understand. But maybe the war could become something else, could transform from destruction into protection, from violence into vigilance, from taking lives into saving them. 10 years from the Cascades, the facility had grown into something beyond what any of them had imagined. 300 acres, 20 full-time instructors, 1,000 students per year, veterans finding purpose, civilians learning responsibility. Young people discovering that strength included restraint, old people finding community after decades of isolation. McAllister, 69 now, watched his grandson enroll in the advanced program. Tommy, 18 years old, had spent 10 years learning from warriors who understood that being dangerous meant knowing when not to be. He'd grown into a thoughtful young man who could field, strip an M4 blindfolded, and quote philosophy about proportional response. The kind of warrior the next generation needed. Maya, 40, ran the sniper program, teaching precision shooting with emphasis on consequence. Every student who learned to make 1,000-meter shots also learned about the weight those shots carried, about the faces they'd see at 3 a.m., about the arithmetic of violence that never quite balanced but had to be managed anyway. Sullivan, 65, directed the mental health programs, walking now without assistance. The experimental spinal implants had given him back mobility. The work had given him back purpose. Between them, they'd prevented 43 suicides, helped 200 veterans transition successfully, provided support to families shattered by service. Stone and Doc Martinez ran day-to-day operations. Professional excellence applied to building instead of destroying, creating instead of ending. All the skills that made them effective warriors channeled into making sure other warriors didn't fall through the cracks. Victor Krasinski, 75 now, slow but still present, maintained the memorial garden. The wall of names had grown, would always grow, but it grew slower than it might have. Every name absent from the wall because someone at the facility had reached them in time, had provided support or purpose, or just someone who understood. That was victory, not glory, just fewer casualties. The evening before Tommy's graduation, the original team gathered around the fire pit. Tradition, annual reunion. Remembering where they'd been and acknowledging where they'd arrived. 10 years, Garrett said. 37 now, senior instructor, married with kids of his own. Sometimes feels like yesterday, sometimes feels like different lifetime. Doc Martinez nodded. Different lifetime for all of us. Different people, better people maybe, or at least people trying to be better. Stone raised a glass. To the Cascades, the day everything changed. To the brothers who stood, McAllister added, when standing cost everything. Maya looked around the fire, at the men who'd become brothers, at the facility they'd built, at the lives they'd saved, not through violence, but through teaching and support and refusing to let warriors fall alone into darkness. To second chances, she said, and the wisdom to know that service doesn't end when the shooting stops. It just changes form. They drank, remembered, acknowledged the cone and the purpose and the legacy they were building one warrior at a time. Not changing the world, just changing worlds. Individual worlds of people who needed someone to stand with them when standing alone felt impossible. Tommy approached the fire, young warrior on the edge of his own journey. Grandfather, can I ask you something? Always. Was it worth it? Everything you gave up, the career, the pension, the comfortable retirement, was building this worth that cost? McAllister looked at his grandson, at the facility, at the brothers around the fire, at the memorial wall with names that didn't grow as fast as it might have, at 10 years of purpose that had meant more than 35 years of service. Every single day, because some things matter more than comfort, more than career, more than the easy path, standing with your brothers when they need you, building something that helps people who served, teaching the next generation what it means to be strong without being brutal. That's worth everything I gave up and more. What if I asked what you got instead of what you gave up? McAllister smiled, nodded, the student becoming the teacher. I got this place, these people, the knowledge that what we built matters, that warriors coming after us won't face the same darkness alone that my father faced, that your generation will understand something mine didn't, that service continues after the shooting stops, that the real war is keeping each other alive after the violence ends. Tommy absorbed this, nodded slowly. Then I want to help, after graduation. Whatever you need, I want to be part of this. Good, because we need people who understand, who get that being a warrior isn't about violence. It's about protection, not just bodies, but souls, purpose, legacy, making sure that the sacrifices matter, that the dead aren't just gone but remembered, that the living don't just survive but thrive. The fire burned low. The Montana night settled around them. Stars emerged in impossible numbers, uncountable as the lives they'd touched, the people they'd helped, the chain of healing they'd started that rippled forward in ways they'd never fully know. Maya looked up at those stars, thought about her father, 23 years dead before she was born, thought about Sullivan in the Choice and Cobble, thought about 9 trigger pulls in the Cascades that had ended her career and started her purpose, thought about Emma's vaccine metaphor, pain that prevented pain, cost that prevented cost. We did good, she said, simple words, but true. We did good, McAllister agreed, and we'll keep doing good because that's what warriors do. We stand, we protect, we remember, we pass it forward, generation to generation, making sure that service means something more than sacrifice. That strength includes gentleness, that carrying weight doesn't break you when you carry it together. To carrying it together, Maya said. To carrying it together, they echoed. The fire died to embers. The warriors remain, brotherhood forged in violence and refined in purpose. Not perfect, never perfect, but present, accountable, willing to do the work that mattered even when it didn't look like glory, especially then. Because the last good war wasn't against enemies abroad. It was against the darkness that tried to claim warriors after the fighting stopped, against isolation and despair and the system that used them up and threw them away, against the belief that service ended when the uniform came off. The last good war was teaching people to stand together, to carry weight as community instead of burden, to remember that warriors weren't weapons, but humans who'd chosen hard paths and needed help finding their way back. That war continued, would always continue, but with every person helped, every suicide prevented, every warrior finding purpose after service, they were winning, slowly, incompletely, but winning. And that was enough. That was everything. That was the legacy worth building and the purpose worth living for, and the answer to the question Tommy had asked. Was it worth it? Every single day, every moment, every warrior saved, every name absent from the memorial wall, every generation taught that strength means knowing when to be gentle. Yes, worth everything they'd given up and everything they'd found. The last good war, the one that mattered most. The one they'd keep fighting until their final breath. Together,